thank you so much, everybody, for watching She Makes Knives Now. I'm sure it was excellent. I know it was excellent. My name is Zach Apony. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the production dramaturg for all of the BAKKHAI variations, including this lovely show that you just watched. Mark?
My name's Mark Costello. I'm the playwright for She Makes Knives Now. I use he and him pronouns.
And my name is James Ijames. I'm the director on this production, and I use he, him pronouns.
Great. So we're just going to have a quick little conversation so you can hear some perspective from these lovely artists about this show. So this first one's from Mark. You were first commissioned to write this play from the inspiration of Anne Carson's version of BAKKHAI. So what about this like ancient text? Like what drew you to what you ended up actually writing for She Makes Knives Now?
The interesting thing is that actually it was sort of Anne Carson's translation itself that led me into this iteration or this version of this story. She has this in particular, the opening to her translation has this kind of beautiful sort of casual poetry to it, where she talks about number one, she taps into a lot of really cool ideas that she explores through her translation of the work, but just cool ideas in general. This idea about every beginning having its own beginning, the beginning before the beginning, life being a rehearsal for life. Like she has these ideas that she really drills into and plays around with a lot that link together the subject matter of the BAKKHAI, but also a sort of modern sensibility. And I think that was part of what I really sort of latched onto with my own work here was picking up some of the things from the BAKKHAI, but also then introducing it into a modern context, or sort of playing with this idea of like, okay, we do have a sense across some different types of works about what exile looked like in terms of the Greek tradition, the sort of Greek dramatic tradition, but we don't, as Zach has pointed out to our team during rehearsals, we don't really have a lot of that for agave. So I think that sort of answers your question. It was a combination of like Anne Carson herself brought this modern poetry, this kind of modern cadence and modern rhythm to an ancient Greek play. I wanted to extend that a bit into my work and do similar work for agave alone, like focusing on agave's exile period.
Fabulous. And also part of this knew that you knew that it would be possible we would be recording it as we ended up doing it. So it was writing for those kind of those particularities, those technical needs, writing for, you know, a Zoom play or digital play. Did that inform your process? Is it different from something you would write for being performed live?
It ended up being actually somewhat liberating. So initially it was initially I was worried that essentially, right, we're moving from writing for a stage space, this giant big open space, and then trying to figure out how you're going to write a story that fits into a box this big. And what that actually led me to do was to refocus on what I could absolutely control as a writer, which was the language itself, was to sort of really land on like, okay, if I know through Zoom that I'll be able to establish with my audience perhaps an even more intimate relationship than I can on the stage, because I will be able to have the audience much closer to the actress than I might be able to control in a traditional theater space where they're separated by however many feet. Of course, with Zoom, you do the concern that you might have is that you're losing the liveness of theater, which is what makes theater theater. And instead, though, I think what we were able to find in our work together as a team is that actually there is an incredible amount of intimacy that is possible through this medium by just giving you such direct and close access to the actress performing. it allowed the language, I think, to land in some really interesting ways, because we have such direct access to Christy playing Agave, working with that language and working through the scenario, working through the scenes. So it was interesting, because the early iterations of this play were much more concerned with the idea of it being a Zoom performance. It was written, the early version of the play was written to be like a Zoom call with like different sort of Zoom windows popping up all over the place. And in drafting it, I figured out that Agave was the most interesting voice for me. She was the most interesting character that I was writing. It sort of focus on her, winnow in on her, and really start to sort of play with that closeness that we can achieve using the camera, using Zoom, in a way that is different from the traditional relationship an audience has to an event in theater.
That's fabulous. James, do you have anything to kind of tag on to that in terms of like directing for this digital theater world we're all entering into?
Yeah, I find it really exciting, the possibilities of what engaging with plays that are supposed to be on stage being in digital formats can offer. I think it's a great way to offer people access. So that's really exciting to me, like people who don't normally have access to like a brick and mortar theater or walking inside of a theater and having that experience for whatever number of reasons. This this project and these plays are available to them. So that's exciting to me. But also just like the ideas that I have about scale when it comes to performing on stage, finding the ways in which I can make those meet the form are really exciting to me. So how do you, like, I'm curious about the cinematic in directing for the stage too. Like, how do I create a close up on stage? Well, when you have access, how do you then create like tableau in this digital form? Like, what are the tools of the theater that I can bring to bear in the process of creating something that's digital? That's really exciting to me, and I felt like I've been able to do some of that in these processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And to get specific about Knives, when you read that, when we got that script in from Mark, what got you really excited to direct this show in particular?
Primarily that, like Mark said earlier, the focus on the language just was breathtaking. And the first time I read it, I was like, yeah, I think this is the one that I have something to say to that's really kind of specific. I felt like I understood what she was feeling inside of exile. It felt like very much like an everyman story, which are the kinds of stories that I really appreciate. I really love those stories. And I liked her. I really liked her. Like,
Yeah.
and when I'm picking plays that I want to work on, I fall in love with the people. So I really fell in love with her. Just reading it and then getting to bring it to life with Christy and the whole team has been a real honor.
Thank you, James. So to kind of return to what you said earlier, Mark, about coming to Agave, people probably don't know this, but the commissioning, when you were commissioned, you were kind of given the guidelines of like a Greek play, limit it to 3 actors as they would during Greek tragedy, but you picked 1. So what drew you to all the way down to a single performer?
Largely, it was making kind of like making, how do I want to phrase it? The subject and the form meet. So once I started to sort of, because like I mentioned, early drafts of the play were a bit fuller in terms of casting. But then I started to figure out, as I wrote different drafts of it or started to revise it, that if this is a story about exile, it's also at least partially a story about loneliness. And it's sure there's all sorts of artistic statements you can make about being lonely with other people. That's a different play though. I think with this particular play, her exile, or the story of her exile, is enhanced by her alone. And what's interesting is, right, it's a play where there are other people in it. She tells us stories about other people in her life. Her lover that she spends time with in the motel, the woman who she bunks near in the shelter. But it was important to me that, like, because it's her exile story and it's her in the wilds alone, that when we do have other people in the play, it's still through her lens. Like it's a version of those people that are hers and hers alone. So I think maybe that was the big push I had towards making this a show for one actress was, if this is a story about exile, she has to be exiled. Like it has to be isolated.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And another thing that we've touched on, we talked about Anne Carson's great translator's note, and James has talked about how astounding the language is, and I absolutely agree. And I'm curious about the stylistic choices to make it like very poetic and rhythmic. Is that a style you always write in, or is that something you were drawn to because of the Carson introduction?
I think the Carson introduction and her overall approach throughout her BAKKHAI certainly predisposed me towards being willing to experiment with more poetic language than I usually do in my writing. I would say that my writing overall does trend towards having a more expansive poetic sense in terms of casual dialogue, maybe. This play is a sort of market separation from other stuff that I do, where I did give myself a bit more freedom to be like, well, if there are moments of heightened emotion or heightened stakes, heightened intensity, rhapsodic moments where she's thinking to points prior to exile or reveling in them now, then those can be like even further lifted by poetry. Poetry becomes part in this play of like the strategy of her weathering exile. It becomes a tool that she wields. So generally, I think this is something that this is a type of play or a type of writing I've always wanted to explore much deeper and much more fully. And the commission was a great opportunity to do that, because I had this character who is a figure out of Greek drama. Poetry is sort of she attracts poetry. She comes from that sort of big heightened tradition. So it made sense to me that even as she's moving through time in the play, as she approaches the modern era, or as she is in modern situations, she still has that to her. Like that clings to her. So it was a combination of things. Like it made sense for her as a character that she had that language attached to her and used it, but also too just the form of the thing. Her alone building this world out of that language as she weathers exile, as she goes through it by herself. It kind of fit together.
Fabulous. I think we can all agree that you explored it wondrously in this one. So thank you for that, Mark. And this one's to both of you. You can take it kind of whatever order you want, very open-ended. What do you both hope audiences will get from this show? James, you want to start?
I have trouble with this question. And it is a popular question to ask in these processes. My honest answer is that I don't have a whole lot of control over that. And whatever they bring to it will have a direct impact on how they, hi there, will have a direct,
welcome, Serenity.
I love it, will have a direct impact on how they see it and how they experience and what they take away from it. I mean, I hope that the thing that an audience will take away is that the things that you do in your past or the experiences you have in your past help to make who you are, but they don't necessarily define who you are, or they're not prisons. That, there was something in listening to Mark talk about the poetry, and one of the things I love about poetry in drama, whether it's in inside of the canon or new plays, is that what poetry offers the dramatic form is this like restriction or freedom inside of the essential. Like what is on that page is absolutely what is absolutely necessary to be spoken, to convey the emotion, to convey the story, to convey the character. It's not very frilly, it's not pedestrian, it is specific, it is intentional, it's placed. And there's something about that in relationship to how we look at our past, how we think about who we are, that is this tension between the freedom of leaving it behind and tracking a different path, and also the restriction of you carry it with you. It's in your body, it's in your memory. And so I hope people, there are several moments where the actress is very close to the camera, and that's intentional to make her feel like a mirror for us in a lot of ways, so that when you look in her eyes and you look in her face, you in a way are looking at yourself and how how you live inside of your own history and your own loneliness inside of that history. So I think those are the things that I hope that people recognize in it. I'll use that language.
Do you have anything to add to that, Mark?
I agree with James in that, like, there's certainly reasons that I write the thing or feelings that I have that lead me to write the thing. What the audience takes away from it, I hope is a great experience. And like beyond that, you never quite know. It's very difficult to put your finger on the exact thing. I think the closest I can ever come is like with my plays in general, and perhaps this one too, is that I hope the audience bears witness that there is something about Agave that I found fascinating enough to share. And that maybe it's her resilience, or maybe it's her strength, her amassing power, her amassing kind of sense of herself and sense of her exile and ability to go through it. Maybe that's what I want people to bear witness to. But beyond that, it's sort of, I think that goes back to the poetry as well. One of the reasons the poetry is offered as it is so that people can sort of experience that and take from it what they will. So yeah, what do I hope the audience gets from it? Much like Agave, whatever they can, right? Is like sort of latch on, sink into it, and sort of go through Agave's exile with her.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, both. And thank you who is watching this after just having watched the show. We appreciate you hanging on and listening to us talk about this lovely show. Thank you so much.